Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we streamline massive research stacks into essential knowledge.
Today we're going deep, really
And
deep.
all the way back to the 9th century, right into the intellectual heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. We're going to explore a document that honestly challenges almost everything we assume about historical racial discourse.
It really does.
I mean, imagine this. Over 1,000 years ago, you have this incredibly influential scholar who writes an entire treatise arguing not just for equality, but for the inherent superiority of black people over white people.
And this wasn't some minor figure. We're talking about Abu Uthman Amir ibn Bar al-Kinani al-Fukimi al-Basri, but everyone just knew him as Al-Jahiz.
Right, Al-Jahiz, a massive figure, an Afro-Arab polymath, a giant of Arabic literature, history, you name it.
He wrote with immense precision and a lot of authority.
And our mission in this deep dive is focused entirely on one specific work of his, Al-Fakar al-Sudan min al-Abiya.
Or superiority of the blacks to the whites.
Exactly. And it was a deliberate, detailed, almost fiery rebuttal written to systematically dismantle claims of white superiority.
And, just as importantly, to document the achievements, intellectual, military, religious of black figures across the Islamic world.
So to understand why he even felt the need to write this, you have to look at the sort of political earthquake that was shaking the caliphate at the time.
That's the key. The Abbasid Empire was booming. It was rapidly absorbing huge non-Arab groups. We're talking about pale-skinned elites from Persia, from the Byzantine or Roman regions, and later the Turks.
And these groups settle in places like Baghdad.
And they quickly become the new cultural and bureaucratic elite.
So wait, if the original Arab leadership, the Bedouin, were generally darker complexioned, and now all the power centers are filling up with pale-skinned people, what does that do to the status quo?
It creates a huge identity crisis, and it leads to this subtle but really powerful wave of what you could almost call anti-Arab sentiment. This manifested in movements like Shubia.
Okay, unpack that for us. Shubia.
At its core, it was a literary and intellectual movement. It celebrated non-Arab identities, usually Persian, and it pushed back against Arab cultural dominance.
But because these new elites were generally lighter-skinned.
The cultural pushback often adopted a rhetoric that, promoted a disdain for dark skin. It linked it to the supposedly unsophisticated original Arabs and, critically, to conquered peoples like the Zanj from East Africa.
It sounds like a perfect storm. You have political shifts, a literary campaign, and suddenly anti-black racism starts filtering into the discourse.
Which is why Al-Jahiz had to step in. And the source material shows the most, insidious part of this was a kind of linguistic trick, a way to erase the original color of the foundational figures of Islam.
This is where it gets really sharp, isn't it?
It is. If you look at classical pre-Islamic Arabic, the words for color were completely different from how we see them now. For instance, Adam, meaning dark brown, was the standard, the archetypal complexion for Arabs.
The Prophet himself was described that way.
Exactly. In authentic hadiths, he's described as Adam or Asmar, which is brown. That was normal. It was even seen as noble.
But the word we now translate as white, abyad, that wasn't for pale skin.
Absolutely not. Abyad originally meant something like luminous or clear, unblemished. It often described a kind of glowing wheat-colored skin. If you wanted to describe what we'd call pale, pink-toned skin, the classical term was amar.
Amar, red.
Yes, red. And Arabs often used it almost derogatorily when they were talking about foreigners like Persians or Romans.
Okay, so here's the trick then. As these new light-skinned elites take over, later scholars who are influenced by these Persian and Byzantine aesthetics, they start rereading the hadiths.
And they take the word abyad and just interpret it literally by their new 9th century standard, meaning pale white.
So they're subtly whitewashing the prophet and other early figures to match the new ideal, while just ignoring the original descriptions of them as Adam or Asmar.
Al-Jahiz saw this for what it was, an active erasure of the African root of Arab identity. So he fought back. He decided to plant that root firmly back in the center of their history, starting with genealogy.
And he begins with Abraham. He heavily emphasizes that Ismail, who is the direct ancestor of the entire Arab nation, including the Quraysh tribe.
The most prestigious tribe.
Right, that Ismail was born of Abraham and Hagar. And Al-Jahiz explicitly identifies Hagar as an Egyptian Coptic woman.
Which is such a powerful move. By identifying the Copts and Egyptians as Black African, which, was a fluid category, but it served his purpose, he establishes that the most sacred lineage, the very blood of the Arab core, was African from day one.
And he uses this to then bolster the status of the prophet's own family. The sources say that the prophet's grandfather, Abil-Muttalib, had 10 sons.
And all of them were described as black and strong.
Even Abu Talib's family, who were considered the most noble of men, were characterized as more or less black. And he points out that the prophet himself married a Coptic woman who gave birth to his son Ibrahim.
It reinforces that African connection right in the heart of the prophet's own house. And then beyond genealogy, he uses religion to elevate status.
This is the part about the Negus, the king of Ethiopia.
Exactly. A core burst of the black community was that the Negus accepted Islam early, before the conquest of Mecca. Al-Jahiz frames this as a profound divine favor.
And his argument is that this favor resulted in a kingdom that lasted long, unmovable, and prosperous.
Precisely because they accepted the message. Unlike, say, the Byzantines or other Copts who refused and then experienced decline and conquest.
So the argument is, your pale kings fell, but our black king was blessed by God and kept his kingdom. It's a huge political point.
And he tops it off by citing the black stone itself, the most sacred object in the Kaaba, as being from paradise. He's linking the color black directly to religious holiness.
So he's established the African root of Arab identity. He's proving black religious legitimacy. But what happens when he's faced with claims of, say, black intellectual or physical inferiority?
He immediately hits back with a list of verifiable intellectual and military heavyweights that everyone would have known.
Like Lupin the Wise,
who is literally called the wise in the Quran. Al-Jahiz reminds readers of his teachings, like that famous one that says if you want to stay with someone, you should make them angry first, just to test their sense of justice.
That's clever. Then there's Bilal.
Bilal, the Ethiopian, the first muezzin. I mean, his importance can't be overstated. Caliph Omar, the second caliph, is quoted as saying that Bilal alone was worth a third of all Islam.
A third of all Islam? Wow. That's quite a measure of his value.
It is. And he also mentions Said ibn Jubair, a hugely esteemed hadith scholar whose accounts were considered absolutely trustworthy.
But the section on courage and fighting is just as important. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Al-Jahiz highlights warriors like Gulabib, who died in a raid but not before killing 7 enemy men. The prophet himself held him in his arms for burial and said, "This man is of me, and me of him."
That is the ultimate elevation of status.
And you get these really complex figures, too, like Al-Wanshi. He's famous for 2 things. First, for murdering Hamza, the prophet's revered uncle, before he converted.
Right.
But then later, he's the one who kills the false prophet Musaylima the imposter. He even had this dark, almost boastful claim that he had murdered the best one of all men and then killed the worst out of men.
It shows the complexity. The black figures were right there at the foundations of Islam, in all its messiness.
Exactly. And it wasn't just individual heroics. The sources describe this incredibly complex military strategy from the king of Zabay, the ruler of the Zanj in East Africa.
This is the Zabay strategy, right?
Yes. So instead of just fighting people who were evading their taxes, this king would do something else. He would send his army not to fight, but to simply settle among them.
Just live with them.
Just live with them. They'd consume their food, wear their clothes, run up enormous bills, until the tax evaders were basically forced to pay the original taxes just to get the army to leave.
That's a fascinating kind of economic warfare. It's not brute force at all.
It's sophisticated, non-violent political control. It shows a level of strategic foresight that Al-Jahiz argues was unmatched.
And then there's that other story about the crocodile.
Ah, yes. The Zabay king who got angry that a crocodile, dared to share his power over life and death.
So what did he do?
He led his entire army to the estuary and had them systematically destroy every single crocodile.
With their bare hands.
With their bare hands. Okay, that's a message. That's about raw power and political will. It's saying our leaders don't just win battles, they dominate nature itself.
And that leads directly into Al-Jahiz's sharpest critiques, because the next step is to dismantle the credibility of the white elite who were making these claims in the first place.
So they went after the Quraysh, the traditional Arab corps, and the merchants.
And these battles were often fought in poetry. There's this incredible exchange with the black poet El-Haikwanan. He was insulted by a white poet, Jarir.
And the insult was pretty vile.
Yeah.
He said El-Haikatan looked like the penis of a donkey wrapped in white paper.
Vile, yes. But El-Haikwanan's response was magnificent, just completely unapologetic.
What did he say?
He fired back. "Though my hair is woolly and my skin black as coal, I am generous and my honor shines. My color does not prevent my being valiant with my sword in battle."
He reclaims it. He turns the physical features into the very foundation of his strength and nobility.
And then he goes for the jugular. He attacks the core identity of the Quraysh, saying they were just merchants who hid behind the sanctity of the Kaaba for protection, not their own strength.
He calls trade a disdainful thing.
He does, and says it would have been simpler for them to just pay a tribute tax than to flee from invaders like Abraha, the Lord of the Elephant. He's stripping away their claim to historical bravery.
And it got personal, too, right?
Intensely personal. To embarrass Jarir, El-Hakan brings up this old rumor about sexual misconduct with sheep within Jarir's tribe, the Kulaib. He mocks their fat sheep as a source of both pride and, well, deep cultural shame.
Wow. This really shows how sophisticated and brutal the cultural warfare was.
And Al-Jahiz also attacks the rising stereotype that black generosity, which was a widely acknowledged trait, was somehow due to stupidity or a lack of foresight.
This is where he uses that brilliant bit of logic.
Yes. He argues that, look, if generosity was really a result of a lack of sense, then children who have the least sense should be the most generous people on earth.
But they're not.
But they're not. Al-Jahiz says children are, in fact, the most untruthful, nastiest, and the meanest until they mature. Therefore, generosity, just like courage or intelligence, must be a gift from God. It logically crushes the stereotype.
So after dismantling the historical and personal attacks, he shifts again, this time to the natural world, to make a philosophical case for the superiority of the color black itself.
He connects blackness to universal markers of value. He notes that the black lion is considered invincible, that black horses and cows are judged the most beautiful and most robust.
And the black date is the highest quality. He's linking color to economic and natural value.
Tangible, practical value. He cites black ebony as the most solid and most durable of woods, and the only wood so heavy it actually sinks in water.
Which makes it incredibly valuable.
And he even brings it right home to the human body. He argues that the most precious parts of our bodies are black, the pupils of the eye, the liver, which is essential for health, even the black bile of the heart.
And he adds, as a final touch, that the most pleasant lips for kissing are those as close to the black as possible.
A truly comprehensive defense.
It's also interesting how he uses the environment to dismantle that idea that blackness is some kind of divine curse or punishment.
Right. He argued it was purely a result of the environment, the intensity of the heat, the quality of the water, the soil. He points to the Arab tribe Banu Sulam, who lived in a volcanic region, the Hara.
And they were dark-skinned.
They were. And he notes their environment made them black even when they took Byzantine or light-skinned wives, and that even the animals in their region are all black.
It's an early form of environmental determinism, a clear scientific counterargument to a theological condemnation.
And finally, he just bolsters the whole thing with sheer numbers. The Zanj claim numerical superiority. They argued that the total black populations, Zanj, Ethiopians, Nubians, Copts, Berbers, the people of India, Sind, China, vastly outnumbered the whites.
The limited populations of Persians, Greeks, Slavs, and Franks.
It's a geographical argument that just dwarfs the white center. They claim the ends of the inhabited world are populated by black people, and the periphery, like the circumference of a windmill, is always larger than the center.
They even go so far as to say the people of Zebe alone constitute half the population on Earth. It's a claim of overwhelming demographic dominance.
And that combination, the geography, the religious pedigree, the historical achievement, the philosophical defense, it gives their claim to superiority a really powerful foundation.
So what does all of this mean for you, the listener? Well, Al-Jahiz's work gives us this rare, vital window into the 9th century intellectual world.
It shows that the debate over race and culture was incredibly sophisticated, and it shows a deliberate, scholarly effort to defend black identity using every tool available. History, scripture, philosophy, even science.
For you, the learner, this should really highlight how what we sometimes assume are stable, neutral historical facts, like the appearance of early religious figures, were actually shaped by intense linguistic and political struggles over centuries.
The narrative was never fixed.
Right. And we'll leave you with this final provocative thought, which comes from Al-Jahiz's own observations. He noted the immense sophistication of the blacks of Sind in India.
Their excellence in astronomy, medicine, mathematics, with Indian numerals, and chess.
But he explicitly asks, if such a high culture exists in their centers, why is it that the captives imported into the Caliphate were always from the lower orders, from the peripheries?
If the intellectual elites only live in the heart of their homelands, just consider how much foundational knowledge and history from the black world, far beyond just the Zanj, remains entirely unseen and undocumented, because history was only ever written through the lens of those who captured its outer edges.